apart in the crash. Only the cockpit remained intact. Badly injured and bleeding, Ron managed to crawl out of the aircraft, but the excruciating pain made it impossible for him to move any farther, and ultimately he passed out. Moments later, Ron's co-pilot, Terry MacDonald, regained consciousness. Dazed and disoriented, Terry staggered towards a clearing in the trees to try to get his bearings. What happened next was a soldier's worst nightmare. In their haste, the enemy soldiers mistakenly left Ron for dead. Tragically, Terry MacDonald would never be heard from again. Back at the wreckage, Ron remained unconscious. Finally, hours later, he awoke.
My flight helmet was shattered, which means I hit my head pretty hard. And you know how in the movies people kind of wake up and they say, you know, where am I? That's just how it was. I felt a real sharp pain in my left leg, and I looked down and the foot was laying flat even though my leg was straight. And I moved it and the foot flopped all the way over. I could see that half of my boot was gone and I was bleeding quite a bit. I crawled over to some trees not far from the wreckage, and I put both legs up in the air against the tree. That's how I spent the night.
Weak, immobile, and losing more and more blood, Ron knew that it was only a matter of time before he would die or the enemy would return. The dramatic conclusion, when It's a Miracle, continues. When helicopter pilot Ron Greenfield was shot down over enemy territory in Vietnam, he barely survived the crash. Miraculously, as he lay unconscious near the wreckage, enemy troops left him for dead, but his co-pilot wasn't as fortunate. When Ron finally came to, he realized that his leg was severely injured and that he was losing a great deal of blood.
When I awoke, it was morning. I remember that it had been raining and trying to catch some raindrops with my mouth because I was thirsty. And then I began trying to think about how I was going to get out of there.
The situation seemed hopeless. 3 search and rescue missions for the 2 missing pilots had already failed. 1 helicopter had been shot down, killing 3 soldiers. A second was badly damaged, and a third ambushed when it landed. Unable to walk, Ron had no choice but to wait and pray. He desperately needed a miracle, and a few hours later, his prayers were answered when a 4th Army helicopter finally spotted him.
The door gunner had seen a piece of wreckage, and that's what made him turn around. They sent a medic down on a cable. He hooked me up to a harness, and they hauled me out of there.
The next thing Ron knew, he was waking up in a MASH unit field hospital, but his ordeal was far from over.
It was 3 days before I gained consciousness. They did emergency surgery on me.
Can I get out of here anytime soon? Head up there?
Not my call, soldier. Tell you what, we're going to try to save your leg.
Sounds good.
Told me later they didn't know if I was going to make it.
Ron was shipped to Japan, where doctors performed additional surgery.
I saw my flying career going away.
When Ron finally returned home, his doctors felt they could save his leg, but it wouldn't come without a price. The damaged limb had contracted an incurable bone infection, one that gave Ron constant pain. 4 years and 16 painful surgeries later, Ron had had enough. He was transferred to a military hospital hospital in Denver, Colorado, where 2 days later his foot and lower calf were amputated.
By 10 o'clock, I wanted to get out of bed. And they said, nope, you got to stay in bed. Nobody gets out of bed after an amputation. And I said, I feel fine. And the next day, I was out of my bed and walking on crutches around the hospital. Absolutely no pain. It was like this huge burden had been lifted.
This is what you're going to stand on in this socket, this area right here.
Ron's convalescence was amazing. He was fitted with an artificial limb, and as always, he was determined to defy the odds.
Keep going.
They always have to chase me out of therapy. I'd get down there and I'd spin until they'd force me to leave, because I was determined I was going to be a good walker.
Excellent.
Then in 1992, while on a business trip, Ron came across a newspaper article that helped answer that question. The article described 3-year-old Russian twins who'd been born with gangrene in their legs. Both boys had been turned over to an orphanage at infancy after their legs had been amputated.
With all I've been through over the past, couple of decades, I could do something for these 2 kids that somebody with 2 good legs couldn't. In an article in the paper.
Next, Ron
الإماراتي ماشي على نفس المنهج ونشاهدهم في المباريات. شوف المنتخب القطري
no further to place the Russian twins.
I told everyone, I said, if it takes more medical care than I thought, if it takes more mental care than I thought, I was going to bring these boys back and give them an opportunity.
That August, Ron and his wife boarded a plane to Moscow to bring the boys home.
I went to the orphanage there to see them, and they were sitting in a double stroller, and the best way to describe it is they were more beautiful than I even expected. On that plane back, I looked down at these 2 little guys, and they were sleeping, and it just, like a lightning bolt, hit me that that's the purpose that God had. That's why I lost my leg, because if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't have pursued those 2 little boys. It wouldn't have jumped out at me like it did.
Ron finally felt that he'd found the reason for all of his suffering. He knew that through his own experience, he could give his sons the confidence to rise above their disabilities.
They tell me often that they wish they could have real legs. And when they tell me that, I tell them, well, we're dealt with what we're dealt with, and we just have to make the most of it.
Today, the boys are 12, and they both realize what a special gift their father has given them.
Dad adopted us because he felt like he can help us. Because if we have problems, he'll know what to do.
Right.
My dad's my favorite person in the world because he has an artificial leg like I do, and he loves me a lot.
That love has made it possible for Max and Andy Greenfield to have the advantage of a full and active life.
It doesn't keep me from doing what I want to do. I can ride my skateboard or bike, and sometimes I ride my rollerblades, and I go swimming.
As Ron looks back on his experience, he's awed by the miracles that have touched his life.
It's been a multitude of miracles. Surviving the crash, surviving the Vietnamese. And then I think the final miracle is Andy and Max. God put me at the right place at the right time, creating another miracle.
There's no doubt that Max and Andy consider their father to be something of a miracle worker. They say the most important thing he's taught them is to never give up. We'll be right back with more of It's a Miracle in a moment.
Still ahead on It's a Miracle. In the path of a deadly hurricane, but will there be shelter from the storm? Also, a frantic search for a missing 3-year-old boy. When all else fails, can one woman's traditional ways help work a miracle? Divining the answers when It's a Miracle returns.
Welcome back to It's a Miracle. Dowsing for water with divining rods is a time-honored folk tradition. But can a dowser find more than just water? Barbara Patry hopes so. Her little boy is missing, and she'll take help wherever she can find it.
Cameron!
It was early in the evening of May 25th, 1999, when Barbara Patry of Berlin, New Hampshire, discovered that her 3-year-old son Cameron was missing.
Cameron likes to play with the dog, and the dog was gone.
Cameron!
So we figured that they had gone up in the woods.
Cameron!
When the dog returned without Cameron, Barbara knew her young son was in trouble. She immediately summoned the police.
Yes, hello, 911. I think my little boy is lost in the woods.
The New Hampshire State Police, along with the Fish and Game Department, arrived and began searching the area surrounding the Patry's home. Lieutenant Marty Garabedian was one of the officers in charge.
Well, we're going to have to start right here from the residence again.
Right here?
Okay.
We set up a command center here at the residence. We began searching door to door in the neighborhood, and also buildings and backyards of residences, vehicles, anything we could possibly think a little boy would go into.
Cameron! Cameron!
Cameron! As night fell, the search continued, but the chances of finding a small boy in the dark were nearly impossible, and by now there were new concerns.
We did have a thunder shower come through and the temperature dropped down to about 42 degrees. And I started getting concerned that he may be down and possibly unconscious if hypothermia had set into that stage.
They're going to get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and they'll gas the helicopter up. And
Once night fell, I thought that we were never going to see him again.
And once they get here, I think they'll find him shortly thereafter.
The state troopers that were there kept telling me, don't worry, he's fine. But it was freezing cold, and I was worried sick.
We intend to regroup and reinitialize the search from the youngster's house.
Early the next morning, a general appeal for volunteers brought hundreds of townspeople to the area. Cameron had been missing for over 12 hours. But all their efforts couldn't produce a single clue to the missing child's whereabouts. His fate rested in the hands of a woman on her way to work, a woman with a mysterious power that would shock an entire community. The amazing conclusion when It's a Miracle continues. The search for 3-year-old Cameron Patry brought together hundreds of volunteers, but after hours of searching the woods inch by inch, there was still no sign of the boy. Cameron's mother was beginning to lose hope.
I know this is upsetting to you.
We're running out of time.
I kept telling the police that we needed to find him, and I think I had given up.
It's okay, Barbara, it's okay.
Okay.
I thought he was gone.
And in local news, police in Berlin are still searching for 3-year-old Cameron Patry.
And while driving to a nearby road construction job, Melody Nunn picked up the report.
All I heard was that a 3-year-old boy had been lost overnight. It was like something physically took hold of me. I could barely breathe and had a need to try and help somehow.
Melody is Native American, a descendant of both the Micmac and Abenaki tribes, and she knew from her heritage that she shouldn't ignore such a strong reaction.
I just had a need to ask for this child to be helped. And in the past, I'd had some success with dowsing, and it struck me that maybe I could help this way. Hey, I wonder if that'll work. I bet I can make some rods out of this.
Dowsing is the art of seeking answers through the use of divining rods. When these rods are manipulated by someone with the knowledge and power to interpret them, it can produce unexpected results.
Luke, you said you had a map?
Luke Couture also worked at the construction site with Melody.
She was dowsing over a small roadway map, and I was pretty amazed because it was pointing to a C on the map, and the C was for Cascade.
I said, I don't think this is going to work. And another co-worker said, why not? And I said, it's the wrong place. The newscast said Berlin.
Well, that's where the little boy lives, on Cascade Hill.
Who lives on Cascade Hill?
Yeah.
You know, this map isn't to the proper scale.
Suggested that we go to the forestry department where they would have